What is going on, everybody? Welcome into this week's episode of High Floor Football. I am your host, Sam Wagman. With me, as always, is my very special co-host himself, the man drinking some nice alcohol over there, Jay Arsht himself. What's going on, buddy? How you doing this week?
I'm good. I'm doing good this week. I'm wearing my green hat matching our high floor background here. So, I'm on brand today and I'm feeling good. We did our first half of this Superlatives. It's a series. It's really split into two. We did, quarterbacks and running backs last week, and now we're doing the pass catchers. So, yeah, I'm excited, man. Good to talk about them.
Look, like I said last week, redraft, best time of the year. It's right around this time in the summer when we really love to get into it. I mean, look, you get all the people coming back out from their little, their little nonchalant, it's time for football. Time to hop back on the old Twitter and into the space to try and figure out what we're going to do for redraft this year. And look, this was a great thing to kick that off, get it started with. And look, we now have a new sponsor. We are now sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. So you can use a couple codes. You can use my code, promo code WAGS. You can use our show's code, HFF. And you can also use Jay's code, which is just his name, Jay Arsh. You can literally copy his Twitter handle, and that will also be his code. And you can get matched 10 or 100% up to $100 on your first deposit on Underdog Fantasy. So make sure you go check that out. Look, we're going to be doing a ton of best ball streams this summer. Jay is a little bit new to it. I am not. I have lost tons of money on Underdog over the past year. I'm very proud to share that. So, look, I've done a ton already. I'm going to do a ton more this summer. I'm really looking to get into it. I know Jay is as well, and we are thrilled to be partnered with Underdog now. But anyways, little recap of last week's show. We both dug into our quarterbacks and running backs breakouts that we loved. Both of us loved Jalen Hurts. You went with Trey Lance. We went with a couple busts at quarterback. Dak Prescott for me, Joe Burrow for you.
With Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, we got to just say the busted ADP because we both,
Yes.
they're both good players.
Yes, and then dart throws, Davis Mills. For me, when we went to running backs, Aaron Jones was a big one there. David Montgomery is a bust. And then, a nice dart throw, Darrell Henderson. And you had a couple as well. Who did you pick for your running backs?
I can't remember who I picked last week as my running backs.
Nice.
You can go back, listen to our episode, give us another listen on that. Get my running backs and my quarterbacks. Trey Lance was my breakout. Joe Burrow was my bust at ADP. Travis Etienne was my breakout running back. That's who it was. My dart throw at running back, I would assume, was Khalil Herbert.
Yes.
If I had to guess off the top of my head, just guys that I'm pretty high on. And my bust at running back, I'd have to look at a list of them right now.
It's okay. We can keep that a surprise and get going to our show this week, though. So that was from our show last week. You can check out the rest of that show to see who Jay's bust was at the running back spot. But
it's a little bit of a teaser,
Yeah.
Actually, I know who it was because we had our biggest argument about it. So go back and listen to it. It was Javonte Williams. And if you want a Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon debate, you go back and listen to it.
Yes, and those are always fun. And we had our boy Peng on there, who's a big Melvin Gordon fan himself, to provide his take. But this week, we go into a little bit more of the interesting guys, and we have wide receivers and tight ends this week. So I'm really thrilled to get into that. And we're going to start going right off the bat. I'm going to throw my breakout at the wide receiver position, and that is Marquise Hollywood Brown for me. So look, a lot of things play into this. First of all, the 6-game suspension of DeAndre Hopkins plays a massive part for me. Obviously, we know that, Hopkins is not going to be there for 6 weeks. Kyler needs a guy that he can rely on to stretch the field and be his every down first read, that's going to be Hollywood Brown across the board. You know, obviously Hollywood asked for the trade from the Ravens at the end of last season, per John Harbaugh, and they really did not like it, but they decided to respect his wishes and dealt him. Announced it during the draft, but in reality, it was agreed to a few days before the draft. So there was that. I mean, the thing with Hollywood is he's an interesting guy because he's not your typical wide receiver one like type of mold. You know, he's 5'9", 180. So he doesn't profile as like a true alpha, but the way he moves, I mean, the guy gets a ton of chunk separation. Look, yeah, he averaged 5.66 yards a cushion last year. That ranked fourth in the NFL. And all these stats are from Player Profiler. The guys at Roto Underworld do a great job with these stats. Highly recommend checking those out as well. But for me, Hollywood Brown is just a very good option if you're looking for someone at a decent price. His ADP is wide receiver 25 on Fantasy Pros ECR. And we are using Fantasy Pros ECR for these rankings as well, as they are updated every other day. And you can do a lot worse if you're looking for rankings over there. So Hollywood wins well versus zone and man. He ranks 8th and 9th versus or in those metrics last year. 8th in routes versus zone, 9th in routes versus man. He won at a 48% clip versus zone and a 45% clip versus man. And the thing with Hollywood that people have nipped on is his focus drops. And he's had a few, but and some of them were from Lamar and some of them were on him. But Kyler throws the ball a little more efficiently than Lamar does. I think being in this kind of offense where Hollywood will thrive as an every down contributor will really help him be a focal point of this offense and really put up solid numbers. And I think his TD rate, which was pretty low last year, he only had 5 touchdowns. I think that'll definitely go up in this offense where he, again, will be the extreme focal point. So, it's go zone for Hollywood. Hopkins gone. Kyler's looking for someone to depend on. And I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm on board with Hollywood as well. And we talked, before the show throughout the week. We'll try and make this episode a little bit less first take and a little bit more of, just giving our opinions, instead of having the debate about it. So in this case, I agree with you. I like Hollywood Brown. He was one of the players that I was considering as well. Coincidentally, he's 25th in Fantasy Pros ECR, as well as he scored 25th last year in points per game. So pretty solid, wide receiver 2 in Baltimore. I think we would all agree that we think, the Arizona offense might be a little bit more fruitful for, a passing target. So, Hollywood had 145 targets last year. And that actually, another coincidence, leads me to my breakout, who's Rashad Bateman, someone who I know you're also very fond of. On Fantasy Pros ECR, he's wide receiver 29. So right around a, back end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. Averaged 8 points per game last year. So it's not, the argument on really what we saw last year. It's kind of, the flashes as the player, not necessarily the fantasy points. He only played 12 games, 67 targets, 46 receptions, 515 yards. The main point, though, about Rashad Bateman, great profile coming out. I think, anybody that's playing fantasy, if you're listening to, this podcast in June, Rashad Bateman, he was a good prospect coming out of college. And at this point, Hollywood Brown's gone. So that's 145 targets left. Hollywood Brown had 91 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's a wide receiver 2. Some of the things that you said about Hollywood, and they're not, bad things. They're just things that happened last year. He dropped some big plays, missed some opportunities last year, but there was even room for more from what Hollywood gave us. And he gave us a pretty good season. So it's interesting when you look at Rashad Bateman, in addition to Hollywood leaving, we kind of expected Baltimore to address the wide receiver position in the draft. They didn't. So Rashad Bateman's competition is Devin Duvernay, James Proche, however he pronounces it, Tylan Wallace. These are guys who really shouldn't be competing with Rashad Bateman. If he's healthy, he should be the number 1 target in this offense. And part of the reason when you call him a breakout, you can kind of quantify that different ways. He's wide receiver 29 in ECR, like I said. There's guys in front of him, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin right now, or, iffy situations. Amari Cooper, Cortland Sutton. these are all kind of guys that are almost in ambiguous offenses in terms of we don't really know who's going to be the guy. I mean, look at Denver; it's Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, and then you have Tim Patrick also involved. You know, Mike Williams is around this range, but he's got Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp. I mean, we're looking at a unique situation where Rashad Bateman is the number one wide receiver in his offense, and if not the number one option, he's the number two option behind Mark Andrews in the passing game. So I like Rashad Bateman. I know you do too. I know you're not going to have too much of an argument for it, but I think there is a lot of room from, the wide receiver 29 upwards for him, especially when you look at some of the guys, I just feel like he could have a similar sort of like Michael Pittman, ECR wide receiver 14. I like Michael Pittman this year. I think he's also going to break out, but there's a case where Michael Pittman and Rashad Bateman finish a lot closer than 15 spots. So I think Rashad Bateman's got a lot of room. And when you have an opportunity to grab the number one receiver in the offense as pretty much a wide receiver 3 in that range, I think it's, a good bet. So I'm into Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, I think with Rashad Bateman, you're look, we're betting on Lamar again this year. And I think Bateman is a huge part of that. I think he's a better NFL player than Hollywood Brown is. Like just as typical, players, NFL receivers, I think Bateman is better at catching the football. I think he's a better route runner. I think the only thing Hollywood has on him is speed. And I think that frees up Baltimore's offense to look completely different. It introduces, guys like Devin Duvernay into the fold as a speed downfield option. It allows Mark Andrews to move around a little more. I think Bateman's going to be really good for this offense. And I think this Baltimore coaching staff is going to really work hard to integrate him into a very heavy role. And like you said, 145 vacated targets freed up. Bateman's obviously not going to get all of them. They're going to be spread around the offense, but you have to imagine he's at least a lock for 120 targets this year.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. And like you said, I mean, they're completely different receivers, so it'll be interesting, but I agree with what you said. I think Rashad Bateman is almost better for that situation than a player like Hollywood Brown is. So who's your bust? Bust at ADP, as I will again clarify, or ECR. Go ahead.
My bust at ADP this year is Chris Godwin. And look, this is not. It should not be a new thing. Godwin tore his ACL in week 15. He did not get surgery. Actually, he tore his ACL and MCL. That was reported later on. Now, ACLs by themselves are interesting, or not interesting. They're easy to recover from. The process is pretty streamlined. Typical 9-month recovery period, sometimes 10, and then you're back on the field. And look, recently the recovery rates have been very high for pure ACL tears. When you introduce the MCL into the equation, and obviously I'm not a medical professional, I would defer to guys like our guy over at Fantasy Points, Edwin Porras, who has put out a couple pieces on the subject of ACL versus ACL and MCL tears, and would be definitely better to answer that question, and we'll tag him in the broadcast after. But look, with ACL and MCL tears, it becomes extremely complicated because both don't heal at the same time, and you often have to wait for swelling to go down the MCL before you can get it surgically reconstructed. That's what happened to Chris Godwin. And the problem with that is that I will get to Kenneth Walker in a second right after this. But the problem with Chris Godwin is that he didn't have surgery until January 3rd. Now, a 9-month timetable, if we're going through normal ACL routes, would be returning on October 3rd. Ballpark, that's about week 5 of the NFL season this year. Here's the issue. If you're returning week 5, the smart thing to do is not to use up a roster spot on Chris Godwin for 5 weeks and not have him play at all. The smart thing, and what the Bucs will definitely turn to do if this timetable is the one that happens, is to put him on the PUP list to start the season. He'll miss the first 6 games, and hopefully he'll be ready to come back when he's done. The MCL presents the wrinkle here. We've seen cases where players are not ready to come back after that 9-month period, even after the PUP list, and we might not see Kenneth or Chris Godwin for 8 to 10 weeks. Their bye is week 11. If they're winning and they haven't shown like they needed him, is it really that much of a stretch to think Chris Godwin could be out past the bye and be introduced to the team for the stretch run to go into the playoffs. They obviously want him healthy to win for the playoffs. They don't want to risk anything. They just signed him to a $20 million deal for 4 years. His dynasty value is intact. It's the redraft value that I have a problem with at wide receiver 22. You're drafting him in the fourth or fifth round. Is it really that much of a stretch to say we won't see Chris Godwin until week 12? So, that's the problem there. The cutting and the burst is a whole separate issue. When you come back off the ACL and MCL tears, you typically don't trust yourself to cut. And the doctors advise you not to cut heavily either until at least a year post reconstruction. So all of that, I'm out on Chris Godwin this season.
Pick on Chris Godwin when he's healthy, you coward. I love Chris Godwin, and when we were talking about this earlier, you told me that he was going to be your bust. You explained why. I agree with you. I'm typically more of a dynasty player, although I play redraft just like everybody else does. But my main thoughts on that, typically were this is 1 year. I mean, Chris Godwin will come back; he'll be okay. But to your point, if we're talking about redraft, yeah, I wouldn't touch a guy like Chris Godwin. I mean, for a lot of the points that you brought up as well, if he played for a different team, there'd be maybe a better possibility of him coming back early. But I think Tampa Bay is going to be good with or without Chris Godwin. Not that he doesn't play a massive role, because he does. But I think they are going to be good, and I think they're looking towards getting deeper in the playoffs, looking towards the Super Bowl, whatever they can do to keep Chris Godwin healthy and have him healthy for that run. So, yeah, I would avoid Chris Godwin in redraft. I mean, in Dynasty, I think he's a great buy low player to get on right now. But at this point in redraft, I think we know enough, or we don't know enough to pick him with a decently high pick where he goes. So, yeah, Chris Godwin busted ADP.
Real quick, I want to touch on this Kenneth Walker question very quickly. I'm a big Rashad Penny fan. I think that's a very ugly offense this season with the Seahawks. Not a huge fan of Drew Lock or Geno Smith, nor the offensive line. They're going to start 2 bookend rookie tackles on each side there. That offense is going to be a whole mess. I believe Kenneth Walker will get volume. He'll probably get 200 plus carries, but he doesn't offer any pass catching upside whatsoever. In college, I don't see it in the pros. And no matter what Pete Carroll says, I'm just not going to roll the dice on Kenneth Walker when you have to draft him, in your top 20 running backs, and you really just don't see anything good from that offense. Jay, you have any other feelings on Kenneth Walker?
I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see where Kenneth Walker actually goes come, August, late August, because right now, he's dealing with a hamstring injury, supposedly, which I think might push him down a little bit. We haven't seen the Kenneth Walker in camp. We haven't seen the Kenneth Walker in camp hype that, everybody likes to see from their rookies. That's exactly my point. So, Fantasy Pros ECR, just what we have been referencing for, these other players, is he's running back 32, which I really think is a good opportunity. I don't disagree with the things that you said, but the players he's around are Tony Pollard, Devin Singletary, Melvin Gordon, Chase Edmonds. I think he has higher upside than those guys. I'm a little bit indifferent to the Rashad Penny situation. I think that, I got excited about Rashad Penny years ago, and through years of disappointment, I think I've finally moved on. But we'll see what happens with the Rashad Penny Kenneth Walker split. That being said, they picked him in the second round. I think Kenneth Walker's a good player. The offense might not be great, which, not too many scoring opportunities. But if you're taking him around the Devin Singletary, Chase Edmonds, Melvin Gordon, Kareem Hunt range, I think he has higher upside than those guys personally.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't get behind it, and I am always ready to get hurt again by Rashad Penny. So count me in on Rashad Penny. 5 years strong and counting, baby.
I dove in on Rashad Penny. I dove in on Rashad Penny's rookie year in an auction draft with all the hope, and it was a disaster. So, moving on.
I found Rashad Penny after Donnell Pumphrey went to the Eagles. So that's all I have to say. I was in love.
Yeah, well, so coming to my wide receiver bust at ADP, again, as we'll say it, or at ECR, is Deontay Johnson, because he's a hell of a player, great player. Last year, he finished as wide receiver 9, 17 points per game. His ECR going into this year is wide receiver 12, which you would say, he's not really priced at his ceiling if he's, being priced at wide receiver 12. He finished at wide receiver 9 in points per game. But I think it's a little too rich, personally, for me. I mean, that's saying he's going to be a wide receiver 1 with a lot of uncertainty in his situation. I mean, Deontay Johnson is a very good player. You know, when we pull up, let me look at his games from last year. I mean, he had a huge season last year, 30 points a couple times.
Targets.
Yeah, I mean, he had like what was it? Yeah, literally 169 targets, 144 targets the year before. I think a lot of us are skeptical that was more of a Ben Roethlisberger, Deontay Johnson connection that they had. But I think there's something to be said. Everyone always brings it up. Players earn targets. I think Deontay Johnson did earn targets. Most definitely. He's a really good player. But we're talking about a switch from Big Ben, who I don't think was great. I mean, Kenny Pickett could be an upgrade. Mitch Trubisky could be an upgrade for what Ben was at that time in his career. But it's all uncertain. And they didn't, let go of Juju and not bring in somebody else. They brought in George Pickens, who the Steelers every single year hit on these second-round wide receivers. So I kind of think George Pickens is going to be solid too. To what extent, we'll see. But that's Chase Claypool, Pickens, Najee, Freiermuth, Deontay. And Deontay should be the number 1 target still. I mean, I think he has earned that right for us to trust that he will be. But to what extent? I mean, to 170 targets? Because that's rare territory. Not a lot of guys are getting 170 targets. So with new quarterbacks coming in, also new players coming in, I'm not entirely sure that he's going to get that same sort of volume. And even if you dial it back, I mean, his whole career he's gotten a lot of targets. 92 as a rookie, 144, 170. So it's tough to say that he won't. It's just a lot of uncertainty for a wide receiver 1 when guys going around him. AJ Brown, T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Michael Pittman. I mean, I don't know. It's just relying on too much almost consistency for a situation that isn't consistent right now. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. And so I'm not really willing to bet on Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett to draft Deontay Johnson as the wide receiver 12 off the board. I think I would take chances on other guys there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do have Deontay as my wide receiver 14 right now. I think I'm happy to take that because I think he's a very safe option. That there's virtually very little chance of him busting. Look, we looked at Ben. We looked at Ben last year, and he was a noodle arm, and he wasn't accurate. He couldn't throw downfield. Deontay lived, in that intermediate area of the field. Trubisky, for whatever it's worth, has always targeted the middle of the field pretty well, and he can throw a deep ball. So Deontay gets that added to his arsenal there, and things start to really look up there. If there's a reason for me to fade Deontay, it's definitely the fact that Chase Claypool will be back and he'll be looking to build off a season in which he regressed really heavily. And they drafted who I believe is the most talented wide receiver of this year's draft class in George Pickens. So I definitely think, and that reads into our friend Tim Dillon's question about Pickens as well. But I definitely think Deontay has some issues as far as the personnel in Pittsburgh, but as far as opportunity cost goes, I think he's being priced really fairly, and I'm happy to buy in on him where he is. He's been dropping further than wide receiver 12 anyways in a lot of underdog drafts. I see him going 15, 16 in that range, mostly because people are skeptical about the quarterback, but they were skeptical about the quarterback situation last year as well. So I think for this year, I'm happy to take Deontay Johnson. I don't know what happens next year. He's a free agent after next season. They drafted George Pickens, in my mind, to replace one of him or Claypool, whoever proves to be a worse long-term investment. My guess right now is that would be Chase Claypool by a long shot. But, things happen during the course of the season, and we will see where he grades out there. But I think Deontay's a very safe pick.
Yeah, let me have one quick rebuttal on Deontay because it's just interesting. So if he had 170 targets last year and he ate about 10.8 yards per catch. So if you dialed it back to what he did in 2020, where he got 144 targets, which would still be like top 10 in the league. That's still a lot of targets. At the same yards per catch, 10.4. So, 10.4 to 10.8. He was a, wide receiver 2. He was wide receiver 21 compared to wide receiver 8. So it's like, that's all I'm saying, is that I think that Deontay is safe. I agree with you, but I don't know that he's safe as a wide receiver 1. I think he's more safe as he's a contributor in that wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 1 range. I don't think he's going to fall off and be a wide receiver 3. But as a top 12 guy, it's a little tough, when you're talking about 170 versus 140 targets. It's just a lot of, to expect. So, but I agree. I think he's, great player.
I agree. I think his target share dips a little bit. It was 28.5 last year, ranked 4th in the NFL. I think it probably dips to the 25% range there. So we could see that drop to about 150, 155. Yeah. I still think he'll be, a top 15 guy at that point. I mean, look, we're talking about a guy that ran the most routes in the NFL last year. He ran almost 600 routes. That's 37 per game. I mean, like, he is an absolute every down player. Like, he has turned into a very good Cooper Kupp-esque player, given the similarities and where they were drafted near the end of the 3rd round there. So I'm really excited, and we'll see what's going on there. But moving on to our dart throws. My dart throw, and I definitely gave some thought to George Pickens at wide receiver 91, but I ended up settling with Kendrick Bourne, who is off the board as the wide receiver 75. And look, Kendrick Bourne does not flash off the page. His whole thing is consistency, and he's an occasional downfield target. We've seen him used in the red zone before. I got some stats that are going to blow your mind on Kendrick Bourne. And I know you're a fan of Kendrick Bourne, so it's not going to take much to convince you. But his target premium, which is defined as the percentage of additional fantasy points per target that a receiver generates over other pass catchers on the team, was 53.1 in 2021, ranked 1st in the NFL. He had only 2 drops, and he had 80 catches. Mac Jones's QB rating when targeting him was 138.1. It ranked 1st in the NFL. And last but not least, he had 2.58 fantasy points per target, which ranked 2nd in the NFL. Kendrick Bourne was an efficiency monster last year. He made the most out of his grabs. Mac Jones was extremely efficient at targeting him. And look, we saw Bourne pop off a couple times. I mean, he played really well in that Cowboys game, the one that went to OT, that I think CD walked off with the touchdown. But look, Bourne gives you so much, as a very reliable guy, and that's the kind of team that the Patriots have built. They're not building anyone who's going to flash, but they're building they build it with guys who can do just everything they need, and they're consistent. Very, very consistent. So I was very happy to see Kendrick Bourne grade out really well, and I definitely think that he can beat anybody. Look, he matched up against a bunch of number 1 corners last year: Xavier Howard, Richard Sherman, Trevon Diggs, Asante Samuel, AJ Terrell, Rocky Sin, Xavier Howard again, Levi Wallace. And he played well against these guys. So he had 4 games of over 20 fantasy points. So he is definitely showing that he can be a reliable guy. For him to be ranked as the 75th wide receiver off the board in ECR right now, I think that's out of line, for a guy that was a borderline wide receiver 2 last year. I expect him to be at least a wide receiver 3. He's going to be a mainstay on almost all of my redraft teams. I'm going to pick him up in like the 12th, 13th rounds, and he'll play every single week for me.
Nice. And you got to give me a second to Dynasty geek out for a second because of Kendrick Bourne, because that's, when you see that sort of player 26. Rise and they start to really, produce. Kendrick Bourne is, one of those lower level guys, a further down guy, like you said, a dart throw in this sort of situation. But you could kind of see it throughout his career. I mean, one of the things that I'm a big Kendrick Bourne fan, as you alluded to when you were talking about it, I have him on almost all my dynasty teams. I picked him late pretty much on every team last year. I traded for him as add-ons in a lot of leagues. Even going back to 2018. Okay, in 2018, he played 8 games. He had 66 targets, 400 yards, and 4 touchdowns 4 touchdowns on 400 yards is pretty solid. The next season, he had under 400 yards, 358 yards, 5 touchdowns on 30 receptions. That's a touchdown every 6th catch, which is impressive for a guy like that who has a small role. The Patriots, snuffed him out and got him on the team last year. He had his career high in yards, career high receptions, tied his career high in touchdowns with 5. And interestingly enough, like a couple of these guys we've talked about, like we did with Rashad Bateman as well, is we all expected the Patriots to add players throughout the draft. Really invest in free agency and the draft. They invested. They took Tyquan Thornton. But we talked about Jacoby Myers last week or 2 weeks ago, probably. I think he was one of my guys, dynasty buyers. For a similar sort of situation as Kendrick Bourne. They're 2 guys who are realistically going to be the maybe 1-2 in their offense. Depending how much you believe in Devontae Parker staying healthy or producing, whatever you really want to say. But Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers are both kind of like do-it-all guys. They don't have this, stellar upside, but I think they do bring a lot to an offense. And yeah, I love Kendrick Bourne as a late dart throw. And I don't know if the upside, is great, but he's a guy that last year, especially, you could play him week to week and you kind of expected a decent floor, and there was some ceiling to him. So I like Kendrick Bourne. My wide receiver dart throw here is going to be Jahan Dotson. And, rookie wide receiver, that's kind of where I do prefer to throw my darts in redraft. Especially I like to the back end of my bench, grab a couple rookies and see kind of what happens and monitor them throughout the first couple weeks. Try and be careful because sometimes in redraft you make mistakes of, having a guy like Nick Chubb, which I did in the past, and monitoring him for 5-6 weeks and realizing, I don't have enough space for my bench and dropping him, and then he becomes Nick Chubb. So be careful of that. If you like a guy in a redraft, one of these rookies, hold on to him for a little bit and see what comes. But Jahan Dotson in ECR is wide receiver 69, which is deep. So, we're talking about further down guys. Don't even know if he's going to be drafted in a lot of redraft leagues. He'll probably be on the waiver wire to start the season. But he's a guy who I would monitor or at least pick up and, monitor those first couple weeks. He's going behind guys like Marvin Jones, Jamison Crowder, Mecole Hardman still somehow is still going above him. Corey Davis, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. These are guys who we've seen over time not really do anything. Jahan Dotson, funny enough, because everybody seems to be ignoring it, went 16th overall. He was a first-round pick, and he's been a funny argument throughout the offseason in terms of people that are talking about rookies draft capital, but not Jahan Dotson, really. A lot of people kind of leave out that he went right in the middle of the first round because he went a little bit higher than a lot of people expected. Terry McLaurin hasn't been at camp because he's trying to figure out a new contract, whether that means he's going to stay in Washington or not. By the time redraft season comes around, I think we'll have an answer on what Terry McLaurin's going to do. So not necessarily an advantage, in terms of his contract negotiation. The advantage is Terry McLaurin hasn't been in camp. Carson Wentz is the new quarterback. He's also new to the team. Jahan Dotson's new to the team. And they apparently have developed some good chemistry in camp, which I do think means something. A funny narrative, actually, that I think, some people may remember, some may not. Ryan Tannehill was the backup A.J. Brown's rookie season. And a big storyline with A.J. Brown's breakout was when Ryan Tannehill started playing, A.J. Brown started balling out later in the season, which was a little confusing to a lot of people. The narrative was those two were working out in camp with the second team the whole offseason. So when they got on the field together, it really clicked. Jahan Dotson could be a situation like that where, he's kind of I hate to use the term sleeper because nobody's really a sleeper anymore, but he is because people are kind of forgetting about him. He's the forgotten rookie. He's behind, Christian Watson, Jamison Crowder, Robbie Anderson, man, who's just talking about retiring. So Jahan Dotson's a good dart throw for me. Baby. Yeah, Robbie with a Y, however you spell it. His competition's Curtis Samuel coming back from an injury. We'll see what happens with him. Dammy Brown, who really didn't do anything. And I kind of think Carson Wentz gets a worse rap than he deserves, and we've talked about him on this show before. Carson has taken a lot more crap than I think he deserves. So Jahan Dotson's a good dart throw, especially when you're talking about these rookies. The Sky Moore, Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson, he just happens to go later than those guys. So I would take a dart on him and see what happens those first couple weeks.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that as well. I like Jahan Dotson when he was out of Penn State. I'm really interested to see how he connects with Wentz down the field. He's going to be that. He can be that deep threat for them. He can run those routes down the field, and it'll be really interesting to see how he clicks into this offense. Um, I'm not putting a lot of stock in it. I don't really want anybody on this offense. It's proved to be so dysfunctional in the past that it's borderline untrustworthy. Um, to be honest, Terry McLaurin for me is even just iffy. I don't know what happens with McLaurin. I tend to think that he gets signed and he gets the deal done. The reports are that they don't want to pay him what the other guys have been getting. The problem with McLaurin is that he's already 27, and guys like AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, they're all 24, 25 years old. McLaurin's came out of college at 23, almost 24 years old. So you have to think about that. That factors into it, and we'll see what happens with him. But I think Dotson at wide receiver, late 60s is very good there.
Yeah, last pick of the draft type of thing. Yeah. You're taking a dart throw on somebody. So
yeah,
and
but
moving over to tight ends, who you got? Who's your breakout tight
end? My breakout tight end is someone I've spent feels like years talking about at this point. It's my boy Zach Ertz. And this is not even a breakout. This is just what's up, Chris? Yeah, this is just a guy who's not being valued correctly, and it feels like I'm going on a tangent with the Cardinals. I'm not a Cardinals fan. I just like the offense this year. Zach Ertz is a guy who was, and this was after a 6-game start to the season in Philadelphia, where he was putting up like 20 yards a game. And he goes to Arizona in week 7 and starts just balling out, puts up solid numbers. He's got 770 yards, 5 touchdowns, 70 catches by the end of the season. And right away, it looks like Zach Ertz of old. So, look, I'm not saying Zach Ertz didn't fit in Philadelphia anymore. I think he was a little bit phased out of the offense there, and it was really depressing for me to see that, because we all know what a huge
legend.
Yeah, we all know what a huge influence Zach Ertz has been to the Eagles over the past 10 years since he was drafted in 2012. I think 2012, 2013, one of the two. But when the game-winning catch in the Super Bowl, I mean, he's done so much. And to see him go to Arizona hurt, but I was happy to see him ball out. Well, he's definitely found a spot. The same way that I love Hollywood Brown to be Kyler's go-to target in the field stretching, Ertz is going to be the chain mover while DeAndre Hopkins is out. And he's going to be the premier red zone guy for, again, an offense which ranks very highly in red zone efficiency last year. And they will be a very good team. The thing with Ertz that we have to think about is that he can still move. He's never been a yak guy, but he's got some of the safest hands in the league as far as
got a little wiggle.
Go. Yeah, man, he's like the Mike Williams of tight ends. He just falls down.
Yeah, he's got a little wiggle to his game, but he's not much yak.
This is like a bet on elevated production for me. We already know he can catch. We already know he's going to put up yardage. He'll be the guy that splits the seams in the middle of the field. He'll be the guy with those 20-yard catches. He can body out anybody. He's still 6'5", 260, and he's still got great hands. So he'll be the red zone guy. He ranked 6th in the NFL in red zone targets last year, and he was top 7 in every single production metric for a tight end: yards, catches, targets, everything. He had 112 targets last year. That alone is a lock for top 10 production. He's ranked right now as the tight end 9. 112 targets will more often than not get you into the top 6. And there are guys around him. My bust is in the top 5. George Kittle is in the top 5. Both of those guys, I think, should be going behind Ertz, because Ertz is a safer play than both of them for guaranteed production. And I'm really looking forward to see Zach Ertz. My prediction is that he finishes tight end 4 this year. And wow. I'm really looking forward to seeing it.
Now, it's a hot take, but it's a hot take I can get behind, because like you said, Zach Ertz is an absolute legend, and top five. It's funny because you beat me to my question. My first question was going to be, "Are we going to talk top five Ertz again?" And you answered my question for me. We are, and
Yep.
you're right. I mean, it does add up, especially. I mean, the Hopkins missing, a third of the season is icing on the cake of what potentially could have already been there. I don't know that I would go as far to jump over some of the guys that you did with Zach Ertz, but I like him as a breakout because I also love the Arizona offense. And, you know, it's tough. I think Zach Ertz lost a step to an extent. That's what I thought when he was on the Eagles. And then it kind of looked like, maybe I was the one with my foot in my mouth. Maybe Zach Ertz didn't, and he's going to carry on in Arizona. He's deceptively not as old as everybody treats him as he is. So
Nah,
what
he's
is it,
just he's
31?
31. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
31.
he's 31 years old still. So, I mean, everybody kind of treats him like he's a little bit older. Where for a tight end, what's Travis Kelce, 33? So Kelsey's, okay, yeah. So at least 2 years older than him. My breakout tight end, and try and keep it short and sweet. We're going to try and get through this. And tight end, realistically, when you get past those top guys, it is tough to find a breakout, a bust, a dart throw. I mean, the tight end landscape is rough as it's always been. A little stronger than the past years, but still rough. My breakout's Cole Kmet. I think he's a pretty popular breakout. I kind of got first choice this week because I sent Sam my guys first. So that's kind of how this thing works. But Cole Kmet was my breakout, and it really is short and sweet with him. There's not really much more competition there, to take targets in this offense. It's going to be Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney. We'll see where Velus Jones falls, Dave Montgomery, some other guy. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. And Cole Kmet, so this is an interesting comp that I would make, but, I don't want to make the player comp because I actually do think that, the player I'm comparing him to is a little bit better. But a Cole Kmet, Mark Andrews type of archetype of how their careers could go is interesting to me because you find Mark Andrews for, years now, the tight end on an offense with a mobile quarterback and really not too many weapons. For years it was Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown and, really not much else. Now we have Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney. Does that sound that different than a Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown type of offense? You have more, a guy who weighs sub 180 and a big tight end, borderline 6'6". So not just that, but I mean, you find an offense where there's just an opportunity for targets. He's going to be an option in the red zone. I mean, your number one receiver is Darnell Mooney, who I think is very talented. He's not necessarily a red zone target. So that's kind of funny enough, Cole Kmet, hasn't scored too many touchdowns in his career. I think he scored 0 last year. So funny that I'm calling him a red zone target, but find me another red zone target on the Bears that's going to take those touchdowns. I don't know. If we're going to, give it to their backup. Yeah, you can give them to their backup tight ends because those are the guys who actually scored them last year. But I'm hoping there's going to be, something different there. As tight end 13, there's a lot of room for him to move up. Like you mentioned, I mean, Zach Ertz is at 9. Guys like, Dawson Knox, Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, Hunter Henry, Pat Freiermuth, they're all around him and kind of right outside that top 5 range. I think you start to look at, are any of those guys really the top options in their offense? I mean, Dawson Knox definitely is not. Pat Freiermuth is not. Dallas Goedert, might be the third option now, as much as I, hate to say anything bad about Dallas Goedert. Noah Fant might be the third option, maybe the fourth option in Seattle's offense even. Cole Kmet, might not be a great offense, but I think you'd have a tough time finding an argument to say Cole Kmet is anything less than the second passing option in this offense. So the breakout seems there. If, again, crazy to make the touchdown argument when he scored 0 touchdowns last year, but I really think that's going to be the area where he's going to be able to make his money. They're not going to be a high scoring offense, but they got to score somehow. And Cole Kmet, like I said, at worst, the third target in an offense. So I'm taking Cole Kmet as my breakout.
Yeah, I think with Kmet, you got a guy that's pretty locked in to at least 100 targets.
Oh, and, Sam, the phone again, man.
Yeah,
it's popular guy.
Every week. I think with Cole Kmet, you're taking a guy that's locked into 100 targets. And again, as a tight end, that pretty much automatically locks you into a tight end 1 season, typically top 10 when we're thinking about it. And with Kmet, I mean, he had no touchdowns last year. You give the guy 4 touchdowns, he's a top 6 option. So we've all talked about what a wasteland tight end can be. I think Cole Kmet can easily slide into that top 7, 8 guys. And like you said, you got the crack first at picks this week, so you took Kmet no secret that it was going to be mine. I'm a huge Cole Kmet fan. I feel awful for Justin Fields that they're hanging him out to dry with only Cole Kmet as someone that can stretch the field or not stretch the field, move the chains. But I almost went with our boy Ben's suggestion, which is David Njoku. I almost went with him.
That was my dynasty buy, Ben.
Yeah,
where were you 2 weeks ago, Ben?
Yeah, he was definitely a great option for that as well. Look, as far as the Watson thing goes, every week it looks more and more like he's going to get suspended longer and longer. At this point, I wouldn't be shocked if he gets suspended for the season. Njoku kind of goes a little bit out the window for me there. I don't know what to think about Jacoby Brissett. I definitely don't think Baker Mayfield's going to play a single snap for that team this year. They've kind of did him dirty the whole way. So I'm going to pump the brakes on any Browns players. My bust for tight ends is actually going to be a pretty spicy one here. And I struggled for a bit before coming to him, but Darren Waller at tight end 5 feels like he's priced at his ceiling. Now, look, we saw Darren Waller, his ceiling tight end 3, tight end 2 seasons ago. And he obviously fell off last year because he got injured and he was, hampered all throughout the season. I just don't see it this year. I understand that, the Raiders are going to throw a bunch, but you have to assume that, 160, 170 targets are going to Devontae Adams. You have to assume that 130 plus targets are going to go to Hunter Renfrow, who just signed a new deal. You have to assume that the running backs are going to get targets because that's what happens to the Josh McDaniels offense. They always have a designated pass catching back. You have both Kenyon Drake and Brandon Bolden there to play that role. And then you have to assume that there's other spread targets out around. And Darren Waller is simply not going to see the volume that we've come to expect from him. He's definitely not seeing 150 targets again like he did in 2020. Look, we look at his numbers from the past couple seasons. In 2019, he had just under 1,100 yards and he had 3 touchdowns. I think we could see something close to that this season. I do think he gets a few more touchdowns than that. I think, he definitely sees some less premium coverage on him with Devontae Adams coming to town. But at the end of the day, I just think tight end 5 is a little bit rich for a guy who's coming off an injury and who, even before the injury, didn't really look himself. And, part of that offensive scheme of McDaniels is definitely spreading the ball around. It's not just giving it to one guy. And I do think Devontae Adams was brought in for a reason. I think they weren't satisfied with the offensive weapons. They added Demarcus Robinson. They added a couple other guys. Foster Moreau was there. He looked great when Waller went down last season. I'm just not sure that. I do think Waller will be an easy top 10 tight end. I don't see top 5.
Let's do a little exercise with it. Would you take Dalton Schultz over Darren Waller?
Yes, I would.
Would you take TJ Hawkinson over Darren Waller?
No, I would not.
Dallas Goedert?
Border wide. Right,
yeah.
They're like back to back for me.
Yeah, and it's so interesting with tight end because, being in the top 10, should be a lock for Darren Waller if he's healthy. It should be easy for him to do that. But I agree with you.
I would also take Zach Ertz. I would also take Zach Ertz.
Well, yeah, you did say that. So it's tough. I mean, you go to Darren Waller and go through these top tight ends, and you kind of look at guys' situations that maybe got better or worse. And really, I mean, the Travis Kelce situation better essentially. I mean, Tyreek Hill's gone. He's the obvious number 1 target. Mark Andrews situation, better. I mean, instead of Rashad Bateman and Hollywood Brown, just Mark Andrews. Kyle Pitts situation was already, about as empty as it could be. Now it's probably better. Like you said, I mean, couldn't have really gotten worse. George Kittle's situation.
Better. Yeah, Schultz is better. Yeah.
Definitely. Dalton Schultz situation better. Dallas Goedert's maybe, a little bit more, target competition. But yeah, I mean, Darren Waller is the one where you really look at. I mean, he was such a target hog, and now you bring in Devontae Adams. It would be ignorant to assume that's not going to somewhat alter how things work. I mean, we're talking about literally the best receiver in the NFL. So yes. I don't think it's a bad choice, and especially when we say it, a bust at ADP, a guy who you're not taking, maybe where Darren Waller gets drafted. I think that's fair. My tight end bust is going to be Mike Gesicki. coming off a good year. So it's tough. He's kind of been productive throughout his career, like we kind of just alluded to. I mean, in between that tight end 5 to tight end 10 range, a lot of guys that are very close together. Not much, separates those guys. You kind of have that top tier. But similar to, your points about Darren Waller, I mean, Mike Gesicki was, the victim of it a little bit more than a week after Tyreek Hill goes to Miami. So you have Tyreek Hill, you have Jalen Waddle, you have Tua, everything else going on in Miami, new coach, new staff, new everything. And I just don't think Mike Gesicki, I mean, he was used as a wide receiver really like just as much as he's a tight end. He's a big wide receiver. And now you have a Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill situation going on where it's really going to be tough to find Mike Gesicki. The point that I just made for Cole Kmet, being at worst the third target in his offense. Mike Gesicki is at best the third target in his offense, and maybe there will be others. So it's tough for me to make a case for him. I'd rather take guys with a little bit more upside. I mean, I'd rather take, Cole Kmet, the one who I said. I'd rather take Noah Fant. I'd rather take Hunter Henry. I'd rather take, the dart thrower, who I'm about to say, Robert Tonyan. I'd rather take a lot of guys than Mike Gesicki because I kind of feel like he's replaceable with a lot of guys that are going behind him. Not a huge fan, and I just kind of think, adding everything that they did is going to be tough for him. I mean, last year he had some games where he had, 12 targets, 9 targets, 11 targets. I just don't see that happening in an offense that, adds Tyreek Hill and already has a Jalen Waddle who's going to be, if healthy, commanding a lot himself. So Mike Gesicki is my bust here.
Yeah, I think that's a good play. Like you said, can't support. It's already hard enough to support 2 guys in that offense. 3 is borderline impossible.
Yeah,
with the offense that Miami runs, even with McDaniel coming over, it's going to be interesting because San Fran doesn't really support 3 different options in that offense either. We've seen both Kittle and Ayuk marginalized over different points of last season. So, I would doubt that Gesicki. I heard I was listening to the FSGA experts draft on fantasy sports radio Sirius XM this earlier this week, and one of the experts, I forget who it was. I want to say it was Matt Deutsch. Honestly, you know who Matt Deutsch is, right? He used to be the director at SiriusXM Fantasy Sports. He said that Gesicki was a locked in 100 target guy, and I like almost spit out my drink while I was driving because like Gesicki is not a locked in 100 target guy. Like I think he'll be lucky if he gets 80 targets in this offense. So I just don't know about Gesicki. His dynasty outlook looks so good once he's snapped up by a different team in free agency next year. They're going to throw the bag at him, probably convert him to a wide receiver because that's literally what he is. Guy does not block, like never.
Still young. He's like 26 years old too.
He's allergic to blocking. So, someone's going to throw a bag at him in free agency next year. And I could easily see him, getting 15 mil plus. He's going to be a really good wide receiver, pseudo tight end type hybrid player on a different team. Really interested to see what happens. Completely out for redraft like I have in the past couple of years because, again, just can't support 3 targets in this offense. So that's that. Let's move on to our dart throws. These will be really quick. My dart throw is Brevin Jordan. And look, this isn't really that complicated. I'm not going to have to spend a lot of time on it. Brevin Jordan, former 5th round pick out of Miami. He was always a speed guy. He was always a move tight end type of guy. Guy that can make almost any catch and has a ton of yak potential in his game. And he showed that last year for Houston. And obviously it was a really crummy offense and he didn't get a lot of playing time. He only had 20 catches on 28 targets for 178 yards and 3 touchdowns. Well, he had 4 red zone targets. 3 of them went for touchdowns. So, I mean, there's a little bit of method to this madness here. I think Davis Mills is going to have a nice step forward. Back end of my underdog drafts recently, I've definitely been targeting targeting some pretty ugly Davis Mills, Brevin Jordan, Damian Pierce stacks there, because I definitely think this could be a little bit of a sleeper offense. We've seen Deshaun Watson do some pretty magical things with this offense in the past. With some not so good weapons. I definitely think that Brevin Jordan can definitely be, a safe safety blanket for Davis Mills in his second season as the starter. I mean, he was pretty good. He had a 71% catch rate on 20 targets, but again, he didn't get enough playing time to really make a dent. And it definitely takes tight ends, especially the ones that are drafted a little bit later, some time to adjust to the NFL, the game speed of everything. And I really do think that Jordan takes a step up. If the breakout is not this year, it's going to be next year. I'm planting my flag on it a year early if I have to, but I do think one of my crazy thoughts this year was that Brevin Jordan is a top 12 fantasy tight end. I have him ranked at 13 in my rankings right now. I do think that we could see something special out of him and Mills. And again, he's tight end 27. This is a dart throw. A really, really back end of your draft start throw. You're not drafting him in your redraft leagues. You might just get there in best ball. But I would have this kid on your dynasty teams.
Totally. And, he was one of the options I was thinking of too. I just give you one piece of advice. Don't let Brevin Jordan hurt you in the same way that Jonnu Smith has hurt me year after year after year.
Me too. I remember.
It's a little bit of I agree. Brevin Jordan was one of the guys I was thinking of too. But one of the things that scares me about him is he's athletic. He looks great every time he gets the ball. But I'm a little worried. We'll see. He was going to be my dart throw too. So give you credit there. Mine, though, will be Bobby Tonyan, Robert Tonyan in Green Bay. He is recovering from an ACL injury. So he tore his ACL last year, missed some of the season. We were kind of, anxious to see what was going to happen last season after he's coming off his 11 touchdown 2020 season, which, only on 52 catches, he had 11 touchdowns. It was an insane touchdown rate, something that we probably will never see again. I'm not going to tell you that he's going to turn into 2020 Robert Tonyan. That being said, I think there was some major chemistry between Aaron Rodgers and Robert Tonyan. And, major narrative throughout this offseason. We just talked about it with Darren Waller. I mean, it's just kind of had a lot of ripple effects with Green Bay, with, Las Vegas. Devontae Adams, man. I mean, he moved from Green Bay to Las Vegas, and we've been talking all offseason about what Green Bay is going to do. Why haven't they added more receivers? Are they going to still add some? Are they talking to OBJ? Are they talking to Julio? Are they going to get somebody else? If they don't, and they roll into the season with Allen Lazard and Christian Watson and Randall Cobb and a healthy Bobby Tonyan, I mean, we're talking about guys. Jones. And I'm a big Aaron Jones fan. I was talking about the pass catchers, which Aaron Jones will probably lead the team in receiving yards. So I'm all on board with that. It. I might get a little crazy with where I think Aaron Jones is going to finish in redraft if we talk about it later on this offseason, because I think he's going to absolutely explode. But Tonyan, is going to find himself in a decent situation. And, just to have that sort of chemistry, like I said, their touchdown rate's not going to happen again. He's not going to score, a touchdown every 5 catches like he did to that extent to score 11 touchdowns. But if he comes back in, Rodgers is going to be looking for a reliable target. Just see, Ben knows, man. I was epically hurt by Jonnu Smith. But yeah, man, Robert Tonyan, I think is a good dart throw. Maybe somebody who you don't draft, but keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on the targets he's getting. He starts to score touchdowns again early in the season if he's healthy. Maybe latch onto it because it did last in 2020. I think it's a good dart throw, good offense, open opportunity, not much competition. Check. Robert Tonyan's a decent dart throw.
Yeah, I definitely think that he's there, and what we know about Rodgers and his trust issues, dude, I definitely think.
Let me give one. I had not ever seen this, and the way that Aaron Rodgers and Robert Tonyan were looking at each other it was 2020 week. It's not showing me the week against Atlanta. Tonyan had 6 catches on 6 targets for 98 yards and 3 touchdowns.
I remember.
And it was like insane. I remember watching that being like, this guy is like next. And then he lived with Kittle over the summer. Everything was awesome. And then he got hurt, last season. It just didn't really work out the way we hoped. So he's 28 years old. Kind of feels like it went quickly because he hasn't really, shown us too much in that time. But 6'5", 237, good athlete, good hands, good chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely see it happen. But that is all that we have for you guys this week. This has been another great episode of High Floor Football. We got to wrap up our superlatives this week, and we will be kicking off some interesting streams. We're still debating on some topics for next week, but we will be announcing some stuff in the coming days. And we got
Cooking.
some stuff. We got some stuff cooking for you guys. And anyways, as always, I am your host, Sam Wagman. You can find me on Twitter at Swagman95. With me, my co-host, Jay Arsh. You can find him on Twitter at Jay Arsh. That is JAYARSHT. We are High Floor Football. We will see you guys next week. Have a good night.